Good evening and welcome to this week's episode of Sunday Night Live, the Fixed Ops Retention Strategies version of Sunday Night Live. And I'm here with my good friends and associates, Mike Vogel, Joe Clementi, and Robert Sebestyen. Today's topic is the multi-point inspection, the MPI. It's a big thing for only 3 letters. And, we all have our own ideas as to why we do it or why we shouldn't do it. Do we have time? Do we get paid to do it? All these different controversies come up. We do it for a particular reason. But what does the customer think? Why do they think we do it? They think we do it to whack them, to sell them extra stuff, the fabled upsell. They're going to find stuff on my car that they're going to try to sell me that I don't know if I need. Those are the 2 imbalances on the MPI. In my opinion, the MPI is so that you show care to your customers, that you show them that you're always looking out for their best interest. And I'll tell you a little history story. The year was 1986, and I was writing service at a Mercedes Saab store. And what I quickly realized was that different cars, but of the same model, came in, many of them needing the same repairs at the same mileage points. So back then, I was always an Excel geek. So I came up with this Excel spreadsheet per model, a 300 SD. These are the things that commonly went at certain mileage points. And I had them lined up and I had little squares and I stapled them to the back of the repair order that I handed to the technician. And I explained to the customer that we were going to be checking things on their vehicles that commonly go on that year, make, and model. So this way, if we can catch something early, it saves them the hassle of having to come back. Techs loved it because it made it simple for them. They were able to not miss anything. And they had a guided checklist. And it increased the RO value and it increased CSI. The customers were happy and the techs were happy. They loved it. It was 37 years ago. Me. Later on, I would learn that this would become what we know today as the MPI. What are you going to do? Luck and timing, right? So that's our little intro into the MPI. We're going to have a lively discussion here. But before we get started, not everybody knows everybody. So if we could start with Mike and then Robert and then Joe, tell us a little bit about you, how we got here, and then we'll jump right in.
So good evening, everybody. My name is Mike Vogel, and I'm known as the Fixed Ops Coach. I spent 40 years in the industry working at dealerships, starting as a porter, working my way up through different positions, and finished up being a corporate Fixed Ops Director. Very passionate about the business, love the business, and love fellow Fixed Ops people, and talking about stuff like MPIs. So I'm glad to be here tonight.
Robert? Hey, that's me next. I thought it was Joe. Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Robert Sebestyen. I'm excited to be here and be part of the Fixed Ops world. I started out as a salesperson for Mazda and Volkswagen back in the day. I sold for about 4.5 years. And then seeing the disaster that was going on in my service department, I decided that I could make the switch and I became a service advisor with Honda. And that's where I also became a service manager and won the Southeast the first time for Top Shop in the Southeast for Honda. And then moved over to Kia, Isuzu, Subaru, and repeated. That dealership was last in the nation pretty much in every category. And within a year, we went to winning the Southeast again with some of those brands. And we maintained a top 10% rating for a long time, for many, many years. And I stayed passionate about the service industry, even though I got out for a little bit, but I was only really out for about 6 months before I realized I'm still in the same business. And I switched over to creating online training modules, on-demand training. And now I'm here doing what I love, creating excellence in automotive service.
Hi, I'm Joe Clementi. Welcome, everybody. Thank you all for letting me join this wonderful committee. My name is Joe. I'm the Fixed Ops Director, Vice President of Service Operations for a company called Mobility Works. We're the largest provider of wheelchair accessible vehicles and adaptive seats. Aside from that, I spent 30 years in the automotive world. On the sales side, I'm an NEDA graduate as well, a dealer managing partner, and a general manager for a Honda dealership for a long time. We had the fastest growing high 1% of Honda dealerships within our zone from our fixed operations side, which led me to the past decade with Mobility Works. I'm excited to join you, give you a different perspective as well from the fixed op side. And thanks for having me, gentlemen.
Great. Well, thank you. And welcome to those watching now. And thank you to those watching it on the replay. Our format for our fixed ops retention strategies segment, which is once a month, we have a topic that we want to cover. We kind of go round robin on it. And then we'll take questions towards the back half. All right. That way we can get all the material out and we get some good questions lined up that we will then address point by point. And as always, if you don't remember to ask something when you had the opportunity, the thread lives on forever. So put it in the chat afterwards, and one or all of us will be happy to respond. If you're not connected to all of us, by all means, send out a connection request. The better community we build, the more benefit we all get from it. Because sometimes you look at a perspective, and one person may see it as an insurmountable task. Somebody else may look at it and say, oh, that's not so bad. If you just do these three things, then you'll be able to resolve it. Sometimes we don't see the forest from the trees, and that's the great benefit having a wonderful network with like-minded professionals. So the multi-point inspection, understanding the multi-point inspection. What's your view on that, Mike?
I don't understand your question. So what do you mean?
What are the essential components of a good multi-point inspection?
So I look at the multi-point inspection as a possible trust builder and a trust breaker, depending on how well it's done. Like every other process that we have in fixed operations or in any business for that matter, it has to be done well, and it has to be done consistently well to be effective. So if we have two technicians working side by side, if they're doing the multi-point inspection differently and not looking at things the same way, we're going to get different results, and that's going to cloud the results that we give to our customer. But that being said, assuming we have a great operation, we get everybody on the same page and everybody believing in the value in the multi-point inspection, as you brought up earlier, Paul, it's traditionally been used as an upsell tool, and really it needs to be done more like a health check is the way I look at it. It's a health check about the vehicle, and where we missed the boat, I think, a lot is not selling the green. We always roll right into the things that the car needs, but we don't talk about the 25 or 26 other items on that multi-point inspection that are all in great shape. Why would we not want to focus on the positives first before we launch into what might be perceived as a negative, meaning recommendations based on the inspection? So it can be a total trust builder depending on how well we perform this process. It also could be a trust loser if it's not done well.
Now, great point, because it's always the fear of the unknown that gives us apprehension, right? That tears down the trust. Now, in my opinion, at the very first point of contact, when the customer makes contact with the dealership, they should have kind of an understanding of what goes on. I think a very good practice that any and every dealership could or should have is to have on the service part of their website, an actual video that walks them through the process of what happens when somebody comes into the store for the first time to have their car serviced, right? It's no different than the tire conversation. We want to have that up front right out of the gate. So when somebody comes to your website, they know you're in the service business. If you put a video that shows the customer the process, when the door opens, they drive into the drive and the advisor comes up to them, and then it follows that car right into the shop through the multi-point inspection, and it's communicated to the customer what the value is. You know, doctors don't even really do a good job at this. They tell you you're going in, and they give you a script for blood work. You know, here, take this to the lab and get that taken care of. But they don't explain it, right? The doctor, you kind of have to go there. Well, not everybody goes, but you kind of, if you want to remain healthy, you kind of have to go there. So if we apply the same methodology to the service department, and we show them what happens and why we do it, okay, for their safety and performance, this is why we do it, and to save them money over the long haul. They see it on the website. They come in, part of the sales to the service handoff includes a similar conversation where they actually show them what's going to happen and where. When they leave, they get a video that highlights this. And each time they come in, the advisor takes the time to go over the multi-point inspection with the customer. So if you hear from the same advisor or the same team 4 times that something is great and you don't have to spend money on it, but just want to let you know something's coming up. Remember the first 4 times we talked about this, probably next time. What do you think's going to happen next time when you tell them, hey, the brakes we've been talking about, you're due, and it's going to cost X amount of dollars. They don't necessarily have to know whether or not they should trust you, because 4 times prior, you told them they didn't have to spend a penny on it because you checked it for them and they didn't need it.
You sell the green from the very first visit. And then also, you know, the MPI really should be started during the vehicle check-in. And this is a personal belief. I would have my advisors do the walk around with the customer, but before they even did the walk around, I'd have the customer turn on the lights, step on the brakes, turn on the turn signals, because I can't tell you how many times during my career I've heard cars, I've seen cars, heard of cars leaving, I've seen cars leaving with brake lights out, with turn signals out. Nothing more embarrassing than you just had the car in for maintenance. You did a multi-point inspection and nothing was talked about because it was just a bulb and nobody bothered to check it. So if you start the multi-point inspection during the vehicle check-in, now you've started the process of explaining to the customer what's going to go on during the visit. This is the beginning of the multi-point. My technician is going to do the mechanical part of it. And there's your trust build right there.
You know, I want to back up, if I might, Paul, just for a minute, because you started out the show with something very important, which is understanding why we do it. Is it about the after sale? Is it about the byproduct of selling a lot of revenue? Or is it why? Is it to make the connection with the client, to deliver value? You see, we often are on opposing perspectives. So our technicians' why is very different than our advisors' why and our customers' why. And now we're working with opposition to one another. So if we're very clear about what our why is with the team, why are we doing it as a technician? Why are we doing it as an advisor? And why are we doing it for our client? And in the end, when we're connected, when we're seamless, the byproduct is revenue, it's gross profit. The byproduct is longevity, loyalty. The byproduct is clients being, referring other clients to you. But if we focus only on the revenue side, which many dealerships have the tendency to do, heck, we did it at my Honda store. We focused on, hey, how do we generate more revenue? Let's start this new MPI process, right? And the function failed because our why was wrong. And when we took the time to really define what the value add for our client was, what the value add was for our team, and why we were doing it, the transition was unbelievably easier for all of those people involved. And Mike said during this process as well, it was a tool for how do I upsell? In our teams, in our Mobility Works teams, we fine our people for saying upsell because we don't upsell anything. We always offer additional recommended services. And the power of the words we use are really important, especially when it comes to providing value for a client. And so I just wanted to circle back, if you will, just on that fundamental thing, which we overlook. We have the tendency to think it's menial, it's the mundane, but we really need to take time to define that with each of our team members.
Well, and if it's done well by everybody, if everybody gets the buy-in, like you were talking about, Joe, that circles back to what we call this show, retention strategies. How are we going to retain the customer wanting to come back? They should want to be, maybe excited is too strong a word, but they should want that multi-point inspection every time they come in to know what the condition of their car is.
They have confidence.
When they want it, that's gold.
When you fail with reciprocity, the confidence fails, right? And when client confidence is increased, it's when they are confident that you're going to provide the best level of quality of service, whether you're selling them anything or not. It is the experience that they look forward to your point, Mike. And in the end, the client says, when it comes time for me to spend my hard-earned money, I'm going to, because I'm confident, right? I'm confident in that process, the value add for me as a client.
Joe, I think that is a brilliant point that you bring into this. I challenge any store out there, whether they're watching tonight or watching on the replay, how many of you actually have a group session with the technician, the manager, the service advisor, where you actually talk about why we're doing it collectively as a team? Because if we are all on the same page, the customer smells that, right? And we involve the customer in this, they smell that. And if all our communication is about that, check your store tomorrow. Have that conversation as a team. What's your take on this, Robert?
Yeah, ask what their why is. Sorry, Robert, just to add to that point. When the technician feels that the why is just to make more hours and more dollars, that tells you need to have more clarity, more specificity to the why. Go ahead, Robert. Sorry about that.
No, you're good. Absolutely. And I think it's important that we introduce the MPI at onboarding, whether that's sales to service transfer, or if you're onboarding a customer for the first time in the service drive, which most of us don't even have a concept of. What does that mean? We just ask the customer, what are they coming in for? If it's their first time, they just moved to town, we write them up, we put their information in the computer, and we roll on, right? But we should do a big rigmarole, a big deal about welcoming a new customer as a new guest and as a potential customer for life. So you introduce that MPI, and the way you would say it, you'll be glad to know that at each visit, we perform a peace of mind inspection, which, by the way, is in your owner's manual. Newsflash, the MPI has been in our owner's manual for decades. It's there. If you look at under services, for all the inspections, it's mainly inspections. Yeah. What we do, we take the items out of your owner's manual, and then we add some items that we know are typical for our local driving, and we try to offer you complete care, 100% truth in automotive servicing, so that at each visit, you know that we present everything your vehicle needs, but only what your vehicle needs. And if they ask, well, are you going to try to sell me a bunch of stuff at each visit? Absolutely not. It's always up to you what you will purchase. But here's another news flash. The factory, after they ship those cars to the dealership, they actually ask us to do a multi-point inspection on those cars. A technician does what's called a PDI. It's a pre-delivery inspection. It's a very thorough inspection. We have to inspect those cars, even though they've only been driven 5 to 20 miles at the most. Then how much more important is it to inspect the cars, look them over? Because if I look at the car, I don't know what I'm looking at, and I don't know when was the last time the average customer crawled underneath the vehicle, but they may not know what they're looking at. But a trained eye of a qualified technician is worth gold. So we present it as good news. I've got great news. At each visit, we're going to look your vehicle over. And of course, the customer sees that at value, they expect the MPI. And I love presenting the green. I mean, I always loved as a service advisor and service manager to present the green. You'll be glad to know today, everything checked out good. We topped off all your fluids. The tires are in great condition. The measurements are such and such. The brakes are at 50%. You've still got so many miles. and then and so on and so forth. But selling the green is so critical. Then you get to the point where you do need some items. Well, it was prepared. We promised complete care from onboarding, and then you deliver complete care at each visit. But it's so important that we do it 100% of the time. I've got a video where I do some magic. I put some cups together and I hid, and I've done this exercise with every technician that I've ever worked with. And I recommend you do it. Take some red cups, those solo cups, put nothing under one, put $100 bill under the other one, and put a $5 bill under the other one, and mix them up. And then do it 10 times with the same technician. Well, not 10 times. You could do it 10 times, but the technician, allow him to do it only 3 times and see what they pick. Now, if they're really lucky, they'll get the $100 bill each time out of the 3. But if they're not, and most likely they're not going to be that lucky, they're going to pick the one with the nothing. They're going to pick the one with the $100 bill next time, and then maybe the $5. But if you do it 10 times, you do this exercise 10 times on each vehicle, basically doing an MPI, you're going to end up having an average that's so much higher, because you're going to find a $100 bill, which is ethically found, not something that you doctored up, that you just say, well, I got to sell this. I need the hours, so sell this thing, okay? No, you sell only what's needed, just as if you would sell it to someone that you dearly love.
Well, that's your point, right? Sell only what's needed, right? So, the technician is going to be the person that does the inspection. That's who we're leaning on for authentic review and providing the items that are going to be needed to be replaced. And when you give all the greens first, when you reinforce that positive behavior, more times than not, you are disarming the client. You're actually taking the defensiveness down by adding all the positive things first. And I just love what you said about just selling what they need, not revenue, not selling things that the client doesn't need. That comes down to that culture, to your onboarding statement as well.
So
I love the cup thing, Robert. I love that, right?
These are usually, it says LTV in here. That's lifetime value. So you got to be thinking lifetime value of the customer. And if you're thinking about just selling a bunch of stuff they don't need, because you say, well, you just sell that, I need the hours, you're going to lose that lifetime value. That's why you wonder why customers, I've literally heard on the Saturday morning show, Click and what's their name? Click and Tap. I think the Tappet brothers. A lady called in and said, I cannot wait for my warranty to be over, because she thought she had to go to the dealership for oil change while the warranty. So I just cannot wait till the warranty's over so I don't have to go to this disaster of a dealership. And that's how some people feel when we get overly zealous on just saying, well, my ELR is such and such, my hours per hour is such and such, but they're artificially inflated.
Yeah, it's a tug and pull, right? You're actually trying to measure something without actually tying the behavior to it, right? So you're trying to measure an outcome rather than the action, and the action is far more important than the outcome.
But I just want
to the number one goal with this. The number one goal is to have the customer come to you for everything they need when they need it. If you can get all the business, who cares what the per dollar is per visit? If you get all the business, you will have won the game.
I'd love to see how many service managers really study the processes of the MPI that their technicians do. Probably 25 years ago, I was told by a factory rep, and it turned out to be good advice, to bring in a used car and have all my technicians do an MPI on this used car and present the results to you. And it was a real eye opener. It was shocking how different the MPI results came out. So just like we spend a lot of time with our service advisors with their processes, or we should be spending a lot of time making sure that the process is both customer friendly and advisor friendly, I think the same needs to hold true for the MPI process, especially the way the technician's performing it. I'm not going to tell a technician how to do their job, but not surprisingly, in one of the shops I was running, I had 2 technicians that loved selling flushes. So guess what? When I studied their MPI recommendations, their top 3 recommendations on every car was flushes. How can that be?
Right.
It's just not. It's not even feasible by any imagination. So,
Right.
service managers out there that are watching, please take the time to study your technicians and see what kind of results they're presenting on the same car. And if you have an issue, you need to address it so that the customer is getting the proper results on an MPI and they want to keep coming back.
How often is there structured training on the MPI? It's just assumed that everybody knows it. It's assumed that, hey, just here's your checklist on your phone or on or paper, if somebody's still using paper, and that does happen. I hate to say it, but in 2023, there's still people using paper. How often is there training at the store to make sure that there aren't these great variances? Because that can make or break the trust right there.
Well, years ago, before ASR Pro got sold to X-Time or became X-Time, they gave you a top 10 for each advisor and each technician on the top 10 things recommended, the top 10 things sold, 10 top things not sold. And that can give you kind of a pathway to what kind of training or conversation you need to have with an advisor or a technician based on the results of that. That's how I discovered these 2 technicians in one of my shops that were recommending that. If you go back 20 or 30 years before computers, before electronic MPIs, I would have had to rifle through 2,000 repair orders and make my own tabs to get that information. So certainly technology can be helpful spotting potential issues within an MPI process.
And you lose that credibility, right? If that's
Correct.
all the technician is presenting, it's what's comfortable. They're probably most likely not process oriented, and they're not clearly connected to the client, right? This is the cause. This is our why. And so when we fall into those habits that are most accustomed to what's easy rather than the more complicated doing what's right, we lose the credibility. And then the disconnect becomes when Paul, my technician, brings me a multi-point and I present to Robert the multi-point, and I only present the things that I'm familiar with or that I'm comfortable with. And Paul's saying, I recommended all of these items based on my technical experience. And I'm saying, Robert, you should only buy this, this, and this. We lose that credibility as well. There's a disconnect.
Yeah, I think you got to look at the whole picture, not just snippets of it.
Yeah.
So, you might have a good closing percentage. You might have a good dollars per RO being sold. But does that necessarily mean you're doing a good job? Maybe yes, maybe no.
No guarantee.
You need to look at the whole picture of what's going through the shop, what's being recommended, why. Sometimes there could be a technician or an advisor that's low on additional service recommendations, but what was the average age of their vehicle? What was the average mileage of the vehicle? There could be a very good reason. You can't just go pull them into the office and say, hey, your additional recommendations are low. Well, what if the average car they touched was 30,000 miles? Of course it's going to be low.
Right.
So, you got to look at everything. Don't look at small, narrow things, especially when we talk about, we were talking earlier with Robert about one of the 20 groups, when they look at upsell percentages and dollars recommended sold, they're not looking at the full picture. They're really not. And
the numbers only tell a part of the story.
Correct.
Right. And there was what you're looking at. Sorry, Robert.
No, you're good. A really cool guy posted something on LinkedIn today that said that values drive behaviors. I think that was Coach Mike. And values do drive behavior. And Paul, you asked, how often do you train? This here is a 3-ring binder, which I still believe in. You got to have a 3-ring binder because some people read better off of paper. So this was the cover for mine. It says warranty compliance. This happened to be the biggest problem in that shop that I took over. Warranty compliance is like releasing your landing gear when you land an airplane. You want to be warranty compliant so you don't so you end up with a crash and lose a bunch of money. But hey, how often do you train? Everything that you train on should be printed and handed to your techs, to your service advisors. And how often? Nobody can say that we didn't train, because in a 12-month span, here we got, look at how many documents. And that's how we went from zero to hero. And every month, my GM was bothering me after about 6 months being new on the job. They were like, hey, Robert, when are you going to be number one? You're always number two. We were always number two. And I noticed that number one in the region was always a different dealer. I was laughing inside. I didn't say anything, because I knew what was going to happen at the end of the year. And we were number two all year long. And then the annual numbers came out. Guess who was number one? But nobody had any doubt about what we're doing. What's the process? Because it's all in writing. And of course, we actually had meeting. I mean, one of the first epiphanies I had is when my district manager, Alan Hyatt, said, Robert, do you have shop meetings? And truth be told, I didn't really have shop meetings. So we started having shop meetings and really drilling down on the things that we believe in, those values that you talked about, Coach Mike, that you got to have the values clear. And the values on the MPI is simple. Your customer should be able to trust you 100% that you're going to make all the recommendations that are needed and nothing that's not needed. Train, train, train.
Love it.
And inspect.
Inspect what you expect.
Now, so another good point that everybody should walk away with here is that having a used car with some miles on it, and then having the technicians each do their own independent MPI and present their findings to the rest of the team or to management, however you want to structure it. That's another brilliant move right there, because if you do that regularly, and we can all decide what regularly means based on staffing levels and and availability, but doing that on a regular basis will ensure that you've taken every possible step to make sure that the technicians are doing things properly and they're not missing, right? We don't want to oversell. We don't want to undersell. We just want to be educators. We want to educate the customer as to what condition their vehicle is in relation to what the manufacturer's specs are on a vehicle like that. And we just present it to them, right? It's not our job to second guess. It's not our job to figure out what they can and can't buy, because if you're convinced in here, then somehow, some way, the wallet will find a way. We've got all different ways. We've got Sunbit. We've got in-house finance programs. We've got all different ways to pay for it. But before you even get to the pay part, they have to be confident that they need what you're trying to sell them. So the value of an MPI is immeasurable. When I hear people complain, oh, we should get paid for the MPI. We're not getting paid for it. I don't know, excuse me, but Robert's point with the cups, brilliant. Because if you don't do the inspection, you're not going to get the job. If you don't get the job, you don't get paid. But if you do the inspection in good faith to the best of your ability, you're going to get the job more often than not. But more important than just getting the job, because getting the job is just a byproduct. You're building that trust relationship, right? People will call you for everything. Any question they have that relates to their car, you're going to get that phone call because you're the trusted advisor.
We have a general rule that says present your findings without prejudice every time. Regardless of what your client is in front of you, what their financial abilities are or are not, present it every time without any prejudice. And when you do that every time and you present the findings, you are less connected emotionally to selling what's most comfortable, and you're presenting the findings as a matter of fact. That fact then can be decided by the client. They can decide on 1, 2, 3, A, B, C, whatever menu platform you're using, good, better, best, whatever the scenario.
Yeah.
When you present all the facts and you do it without prejudice, it's so much easier for that client to make an informed decision.
Joe, I want to add to that, your point about options, giving customer options. So I was trained on a process called the RIM process. For those of you that may not know the RIM process, R stands for related to what the vehicle was brought in for. So the first thing that you want to discuss with your customer off the multi-point inspection is if they came in with a check engine light, if they came in with a brake noise, if they came in with a pulling problem, whatever the case might be, you want to talk about what they brought the vehicle in for first. I stands for any kind of immediate concern. It's something that really should be addressed today while the vehicle's there. It's very, very important. It could be a safety concern. It could be a bad oil leak, any of those. And the last thing is a maintenance type item that could be deferred if necessary to next week, next month, next visit. When you stair step the customer in that direction, a very, very high percentage, to your point, Joe, will probably say, you know what, the car's already there. Go ahead and do everything today, and let's move forward. Very few are going to just say, oh, let's just cut out these few items. Because you've given them options, you haven't tried to shove it down their throat, so to speak.
That's right. That whole RIM process was built around providing options so the customer can make a choice rather than being told, you must do this, right? We're giving them options. And the RIM process is so fundamental at its root, but really when you get down to that process and you're presenting on the drive, you're presenting all the facts so a client can make an informed decision and they can decide which option they handle and buy now.
Yeah, and then the other thing is that you want to give them a total package price. You don't want to discuss each individual item pricing, because once you do, you lose the customers. They go into the ether, so to speak. If you're recommending 3, 4, 5 different things and you stopping to give them a price for each individual item, you've lost their attention.
Right.
So you got to go through everything that's needed. You got to give them an out-the-door price, including tax and everything, and let things go where they go.
Yeah, no, I mean, these are key elements of building the trust. I want to get to a couple of comments. Jeff Daniel, consistently, brakes can't go from 4 millimeters to 7 millimeters. Tires don't grow tread. It's only as good as the operator. Video helps this aspect a ton, right? That's what we talked about before, right? It has to be consistent, because look, they're not always going to get the same tech that works on the car. So it's going to seem really funny if between last visit and this visit, because we can't say that everybody looks at the previous RO. All of a sudden, the brakes or the tires are in better shape.
Practice when the need for the result is less impactful, so that when the stakes become higher, you're prepared. And so the more you practice, the more you understand the why and the clarity. The more you practice, when the stakes are high, it's going to be that much easier, to Jeff's point. Now, from a process point, everybody understands.
Right. Ed Chipolowski said, what do customers do while waiting for service? They use their cell phone. How about a dealership link to watch the MPI using augmented reality on their phone? I'm not quite sure how you would do that, but in concept, it sounds like a great idea.
Yeah. Hey, Paul, just a note on the thing that you said about paying techs for MPIs. I would pay a tech temporarily for the MPI, temporarily, if they're not believers. Because you have early adopters, you have those who are going to be, midterm adopters and late adopters, or never adopters and naysayers. But I've seen technicians go from 30 hours a week to 55 plus hours a week when they became 100% believers. And then everybody else around them in the shop accused them of being fed the gravy, when in fact, the guy started 15 minutes earlier than everybody else, did a complete MPI on every single vehicle, and went from 30 hours a week. And then You had the other guys, because these guys were under the influence of one of the old technicians. And some of the other young guys said, "What's David doing? What's David doing?" I said, "Well, David diagnoses every car. He doesn't look at the ticket. We had a deal with David. Do not cherry pick those tickets. You're just going to get the next one. That's how you're going to become a master technician, an expert." And he did. And then he did the MPI. So these other guys started doing the MPIs too, and their hours went up. And in the meantime, the guy that was the naysayer, now I could have paid him for 6 months for the MPIs, and his results would not have improved because he didn't believe. There was something in him that just couldn't get himself to actually, he thought that selling or actually recommending something needed to a customer was unethical, even though it was needed. He wanted to diagnose that one thing that the car had, and this guy influenced all the young techs, which is a disaster, but the hours go up tremendously for the technicians. So the technicians that become believers, they will thank whoever introduced them to the MPI process and never look back.
To Jeff's comment, yes, I see. He said we text them the link to watch their inspection. My bad. I thought he meant like while they were doing it in real time. But yeah, I've seen those videos also, and those videos are very, very effective. I just misunderstood Ed's question. I thought he meant in real time while they were doing it. Let's see.
Paul, I've seen an independent shop go from the average 30% approved recommendations to up to 90% approved recommendations when they switch to video.
Especially at the dealership, that's valuable because in the aftermarket, it's a lot easier to build a relationship with the customer because the customers are brought into the shop and they're standing under their car and they're shown the actual item. We don't necessarily have that luxury at the dealership. So video really is the next best thing to being there. And that is a huge trust builder. We have a personal friend. She brought her car into the shop. It was an older vehicle, but she wasn't planning on buying a new car anytime soon. And they gave her, it was a very, very thorough inspection. I have that video. Very thorough inspection. The car legitimately needed a bunch of work, and she authorized all the work. She says, "You know what? I'm planning on keeping the car for a long time. In the grand scheme of things, it's a lot less money than going out and buying a new car, because average new car is $50,000 now, average, and that's not a large SUV. That's just an average vehicle."
You know, you said independents bring the client in to show them the car physically, right?
Yeah.
Why do they do that? Because they're presenting value for that client on their particular vehicle, right? They're tying the failure in with a recommendation. And by using a virtual or a visual MPI, you're now giving the client the intangibles. You're making that now tangible. When you can show that brakes need to be replaced or tie rods are broken or whatever the mechanical failure might be, now you're connecting with something visual. That client can now say, "This makes sense to me. I don't know what the hell it does, but I understand now that it's busted and it needs to be replaced. I can trust that Robert's making a recommendation on my vehicle because I can see it."
But you see, Joe, you just pointed out what the flaws are in our business. If you go back to pre-videos, pre-photos, if we were truly building relationships with our customers and we had built that trust with our customers, they'd be buying from us. I mean, how did we do it when I was a service advisor in the 80s, when Paul was a service advisor in the 80s? I mean, we had customers trust us because we built the relationship from day one. And going back to our earlier conversation, we were selling the green from the very first visit. We weren't trying to sell anything until the car actually needed something. So because as an industry, we haven't done a really great job of building relationships over the decades, we're faced with having to prove it through videos and pictures.
But you remember early on in those decades, though, the whole business, our business was on relationships. Now it's transpired where it is now a transactional relationship. And so while that may be flawed on its exterior, interior wise, that's how the operation is run, right? It's built financially outward. And so now you have to show those credibilities, that connection to the client in the process. And if you're going to do anything, it's got to be relational, right? But you have to build that through trust.
I just hope we don't use the videos as a crutch for building trust. We should be building that relationship and trust outside of that. That should just be a bonus.
Right. Don't get me wrong. It doesn't replace that, right, Mike? It doesn't replace the relation, but
I think some people will use it for that purpose.
Right.
It's the vitamin C when you feel you're getting a cold coming on, right?
Yeah.
Because if you have that conversation from moment one, then chances are good you don't necessarily need it, but it's nice to have as a backup.
Well, so that if the spirit of that first encounter, if the meet and greet didn't go well, the welcome didn't go well, the video is not going to make up for the relationship. Sure, the customer might still buy it, but they're reluctant to buy because they'll think, you know what, I'm not buying anything other than that warranty item from that jerk. If I allow my attitude that was maybe contaminated by something that happened at home, and I don't treat you, don't welcome you Ritz-Carlton style, or at least Chick-fil-A style, then that video is not going to make up for that. So it's yes, like you said, Mike, that it should not become a crutch. At the same time, we've got to focus on that personal relationship, which is based on integrity. It's really not based on some kind of necessarily going too deep into finding out every hobby from every customer and learning all of their pets' names, which is nice if you do. You will with your best customers. You're going to know them by first. You're going to know their spouses. That's right. And that's great. Those are going to be your top customers. But most customers will come back to us, and they like us more because of our integrity and how we keep our promises of time and of pricing. So we don't surprise them with time expectations. We don't surprise them with the pricing. So if we do that MPI, like you said, Mike, that we do the complete pricing, then you come to pick up the vehicle and I'm $300 higher. And I said, well, sorry, you got to pay taxes. I know the total was $4,000, but I mean, the taxes, you got to pay taxes.
Right.
And fees and shop fees and all that. Well, that's $300, because it was so hard to add that into the estimate, right? But the relationship still matters quite a bit, at least as much as it ever mattered.
Well, the MPI just provides transparency, right? I mean, when you're talking about the tools necessitate part of that relationship, particularly if you're an inexperienced advisor, that is part of what makes that connection with the client is the transparency of the multi-point inspection process. And that transparency then correlates to relationships.
All right, Ron's got a comment. Last week, we talked about techs filling out all their repairs for warranty. This week, we talk about how techs have to fill out the MPI, and they haven't even worked on the car yet. Could this be part of the tech shortage problem?
As far as warranty, I think every dealer association in the country has been fighting aggressively against the manufacturers to get better rates. And it's definitely improving from when I was running stores. In regards to getting paid on the MPI, I kind of differ a little bit with you, Paul. I do think that if the car comes in for a non-maintenance type item and you expect the technician to do the MPI, they should get paid on it. However, with a caveat of if work gets sold on the MPI, then that's his pay, right, or her pay for that matter.
But one cancels part of the other out.
If a car's coming in for 60,000 mile service, as Robert brought up earlier, it's in the owner's manual. All those inspections are part of the 60,000 mile service. So technically they are getting paid as part of that. But if I got a customer that comes in for a squeak in the front end and I expect my technician to do the multi-point inspection, then I should pay him until we know whether the customer is going to buy any recommendations or not. Personal opinion, everybody has an opinion on this.
Yeah, I agree with you because they're now working congruently with why they're doing it, right? And there is a benefit to that technician to doing that. They should get paid if it doesn't result in a recommended service.
Now,
I'm sorry. The
but
goal has to be clear. The goal has to be clear, 100% MPI. So if you got to pay them to get it, you're already paying for advertisement and you don't know which part of it works. The problem with advertisement is half of it works and we don't know which half. But with MPIs, we know that it'll produce results. So if you got to pay them. And Jeff Daniel, who I respect highly, he says, hey, pay them. But hey, if you got to pay him, pay him. The point is get 100% of MPIs done because we know it's going to sell so much more work and your customer is going to be more satisfied. The key here is satisfied customers. As a customer, I'm so disappointed when I have to hear a week after I left the dealership that say, oh, by the way, we noticed the leak and it's already going down on your alternator and it's going to damage the alternator and your belt's about to pop off. I forgot to tell you, it's on your receipt.
Yeah.
Like, come on, guys. It's about taking care of our customers.
Consistent process.
Yep.
Get it one way or another. If you got to pay them, pay them. If you can sell it to the techs and they do it diligently with integrity without paying them, they're going to get paid because they're going to get all the extra work. So you know that already as a manager. They're going to get paid either way, but the techs don't know. Some of them are not believers yet. So for those, you got to pay them and then hold them accountable to make sure that they're really good. You inspect what you expect.
no, I hold certain feelings, but I'm certainly open to everything. I went from not believing in having any kind of a kiosk to having it as part of the process when I learned that there's a percentage of the customers that will not come in if you don't offer them that experience. And at that point, you have to ask yourself the question, do I want their business? Yes or no? If the answer is no, then I don't have the kiosk. But if the answer is yes, then I kind of have to get the kiosk. And I guess to your point of point two, it's not the end of the world. We do spend a lot of money on marketing anyway. And to your point, we know there's going to be a lift in the ROs. It's not voodoo science, it's measurable sime, right?
Well,
we know there's to be a fact.
And to Ron Usher's point, if you go back to what cars what kind of maintenance was done on cars back in the 80s and 90s compared to what maintenance is required today, it's next to nothing. So, their pay technically has been cut. Then cars are built better today. They don't break as much. There's not as many opportunities to do any kind of repairs on it. And warranty is warranty. Warranty's always paid bad, and it continues to pay bad. And they continue to have recalls. And I can't speak for other manufacturers, but what used to really annoy me with Toyota was they'd come out with a recall for a certain repair, and all of a sudden the technician gets paid 4 or 5 tenths less for that same repair because it's a recall. How did this get easier?
Right.
I don't understand. It's the same freaking repair.
It's a number that keeps going up and down because yes, there's less work to be done. Yes, they pay less on the warranty, but then warranty rates, reimbursements rates have gone up. So it's a very fluid equation.
Yeah, and there's some stores. I saw a store advertising today that they pay 1.5 times warranty flat rate to their technicians. That's what it's coming to. So dealerships are getting more dollars per RO, but now they're giving back to the technicians, which is great. They should be.
Paul, to Ron's point about technician retention, show me a dealership where the owner, or if the owner's not present, the general manager and the service manager spend time with the techs. If the general manager or the owner, especially, they walk slowly through the shop and say hello to the techs and get to know them by name, especially when there's events, Thanksgiving or whatever. They sit at the same table, they get to know them. And I'll show you a dealership where technicians stay for 30, 40 years. They retire from those dealerships. That's happening. And if the owner's not available or the GM, the service manager's got to be a people person who spends time with each tech and gets to know them. Yep. And then, of course, not just be nice to them and get to know their family, and then hopefully they'll stay with you, but handle these things. When a guy's working only warranty transmissions, and even the best in the country can only do that transmission in 7 hours, let's say, and it pays 5, you got to take care of the tech. You got to pay him a rate that covers his value. We got to value the tech as a human being, not just by saying, oh, you're a valued employee. I mean, that makes technicians puke. Sorry for the expression. But as a technician, they get sick to the stomach when they hear, I'm a valued employee, except for nobody cares about my income and about my mental well-being. So you got to take care of the technicians. And obviously, at the same time, we're a team here as we together serve our customers at the highest level.
And to Jeff Daniels' point, all those metrics are trackable. MPI requested, percent of them the tech did, percent of jobs the advisor sold, and lastly, with video, how many times the consumer viewed the video. I mean, if the proof isn't in the pudding.
Paul, put up his next quote.
There is one super tech that performs all recall repairs for all brands and sets the time study. LOL. Yeah, wait, is that the one that does it in a clean environment on a brand new vehicle with no rusted bolts?
And no distractions. Yeah.
And it's done it 100 times, and then whatever the best time is, that's what everybody else gets paid on? Is that what he's talking about?
Yes.
He's a ninja. He's a tech ninja.
Well said, Jeff.
Well, that brings us to the end of yet another exciting episode of Fixed Ops Retention Strategies. I want to thank you, gentlemen, for participating. As always, I think we make a great team. We see the world in a very similar bay, if you will.
Hey, yet different enough that we bring a lot of value. But hey, one last thought I had, just it's a pressing thought, is just really pressing on it. Get it one way or another, verify that within the next 30 days that you're getting 100% good MPIs. Do it one way or another. I mean, if you got to pay them, pay them. If you can sell it, sell it. But that's the only good care for your clients, do the MPI 100% of the time.
And I'd like to add one last thing as well. Most importantly, have the why discussion with everybody. Talk through it with them. Define the why, and the byproduct would be more revenue, more gross profit, more billable hours, on and on and on, and happier employees, team members.
Any final thoughts from you, Mr. Vogel?
Sell the green.
Sell the green. Truer words have not been spoken. So for those not 100% familiar with the process, we've got a short video about the process, and then we'll see you next week on Sunday Night Live. Thanks for watching. Those that were here, thanks for watching. Those on the replay, enjoy this short video.
Now I'm going to sign into our program here. This is going to allow me to upload pictures and videos of the vehicle. It sends it up to the advisor so the customer can see. I'm going to open up our multi-point inspection here. Open up my camera. We're going to take a video. Lights, doing a visual inspection here. Nice and tight. I'm going to take pictures of each tire. I'll grab my brake measurement tool. And now we'll measure the brakes. I'll save that, and I'll send this up to our service advisors so they can show the customer. That way you can see your brakes, your tire measurements, and anything else that we recommend. So here's our multi-point inspection. We checked our bulbs and lights, everything looked good. Our windshield wipers, windshield condition was good. Everything looks okay with the emergency brakes, the horn operation. Our fuel cap gasket looks good. Our engine air filter was good. Fluids were all good. We topped off our antifreeze. We're going to scroll down here. Battery terminals look good. All of our suspension looked good. Our steering, gearbox, mufflers and exhaust look good. No major leaks. All of our boots look good. Transmission, fluid level and everything looked okay. A few lines and connections, nuts and bolts on body chassis, and all of our wheel bearings. I didn't hear any wheel bearings. So we're going to go in and put our tire measurements here. I had about 7/30 seconds all the way around, and they weren't wearing unevenly, so I'm going to put good in here. And then our brake measurements, we had 9 millimeters in the front, and we had 8 millimeters in the rear. I'm going to go ahead and complete this inspection, and it'll go up to our advisor.
All right, just received back the multi-point inspection from the technician. Looks like everything was in great shape. Tires are good, brakes are good, filters are in good shape, so nothing's needed. We will send this off to the customer so they can review it. We're going to send this via text and email so she can see the pictures from the inspection. Just wanted to give you a call to let you know I sent you the multi-point inspection. Overall, everything is in great shape. There are no additional recommendations at this time. All right, great. We're just going to move forward with the oil change, and I'll give you another update once we wrap everything up. Thanks.